Hello, everyone. Hi, Freddie. Your audio is off right now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, all good.
Hello, good to see ya.
Hello, good to see you too. Happy Saturday, everyone.
Yeah, likewise. My mom's up. Mom, turn your camera off.
Hello.
Turn your camera off. I do that.
Yeah, it's awesome that
It's
family
so weird seeing you with false teeth. Christine, my homie, Christine. I'm gonna talk about marginalized to empower. That coming up. Oh yeah, that's coming up. I'm gonna talk about that. Oh Lord, God is good. All right, so you have the bio, then you're good.
Yes, and I just made you a co-host, so you should be able to.
Yeah. Hold on.
Put up a PowerPoint if needed.
That's all right, Mom. You can leave your camera on. It's fine. I don't want you to miss it. Can you hear? Mom, can you hear? If you can hear, put your thumb up. Oh, bless you, Christine. Mom, if you can hear, wave at the camera. Okay. All right, cool. You're fine. Okay.
All right. Well, everyone, welcome to our session on student advocacy and collegiate recovery. And we have Freddie. How do you say your last name?
Shegog.
Frederick Shegog. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I had the pleasure of interacting with you yesterday and has been nothing but positive things so far. And so you are the founder and CEO of The Message LLC, which is inspiring, educating, and creating healthy lifestyles for all as a motivational speaker. I love that. Dumpster diving, panhandling, and drinking were once everyday activities for Freddie. And now in his early 20s, he entered a spiral of addiction and untreated mental health that pulled him away from his childhood dreams. Despite a decade of alcohol abuse and time spent homeless, Shegog was able to transform himself into a graduate with high honors. Now, as a motivational speaker, he is on a mission to help others combat substance use disorder and mental health. Experienced in creating and facilitating workshops to address the needs of the community in the areas of collegiate recovery, substance use disorders, and mental health, he is challenging the way colleges serve and educate students in recovery and dealing with mental illness. Freddie routinely speaks to patients range in age from 16 years old to 65, dealing with physical, mental, developmental, and emotional disabilities. He provides group and lecture topics ranging from family, parenting, friendships, significant others, and goal setting. And I just want to add a little bit more. He's currently a junior at West Chester, enrolled in the Honors College after receiving a full ride from being on the all-state, PA?
Academic team.
PA academic team. Thank you so much for being here with us, and I'm so happy to have the opportunity to introduce you.
Oh, thank you. All right. First of all, thank you all for being here. I cannot tell you how humble, grateful, and thankful I am to have this platform to share with you my gifts and blessings and how advocacy and education has literally changed the course of my life. Also, I want to thank the university, I want to thank the committee and Rachel Brand for not only believing in my story, but believing in my skill set, and also for having this conference, because these topics, which are complex, and on top of that, collegiate recovery, bringing that awareness is going to make it better for the generations behind us. So thank you. And thank you for everybody on here for the work that you do, for the education that you provide others, and for the selfless efforts that you put in every day. Truly thank you. So my name is Frederick Shegog. Everybody calls me Freddie. I only get called Frederick when I didn't take out the trash or when my mother is mad at me. So I get asked all the time, Freddie, How did you go from a homeless, dumpster diving, panhandling, drug addicted, alcohol addicted, right? Sleeping next to dumpsters, sleeping on, roads, sleeping on, whatever, walking around out of your mind. How did you go from that to within a little over 4 years, you have a motivational speaking company where you travel the country and you speak on mental health and substance abuse. You uplift student bodies at colleges. You keynote national conferences. You hold high school assemblies. You've been recognized as a national scholar by Coca-Cola and Phi Theta Kappa. You received the All-State P Academic Team, which allowed you a full ride tuition at Westchester University. You're a published writer. You're a family man. You're a volunteer. How did you do that within 4 years? Here's your answer: advocacy and support. See, I have people that are in my network that make it a point to teach me how to be an advocate, and they also empower me to use my voice. See, they taught me that it was up to me to make sure that I share my story, because we live in a world where stigma outweighs education. See, we live in a society where, regardless of all these medical institutions, some of the smartest people that have ever walked on this planet to study the brain for decades and decades, right? Some of the best schools, some of the best theologians, some of the best scholars, some of the best minds have presented all this information and evidence dating back years and years and years. We live in a society where we will throw that out the window and we will believe what we want to do. Literally, stigma outweighs education. So they understood that I have a story that needs to be heard by the masses so that the people come up behind me will have it better. They taught me how to be an advocate. They taught me how to move in these rooms. They taught me the importance of why I need to share my pain, because that pain may be the fruit of success for another student. But let's back this up. This speech is about how I became an advocate, why advocacy is so important, and I'm gonna also give you a tutorial on how to be an advocate, right? And how to move in these rooms and how to get the things you need to get done. And also by showing the people underneath you as far as mentorship and all that stuff. So at 9 years old, people always ask me, Freddie, what did you go to rehab for? What did you check in for? Let me be very clear. The first thing I've ever abused in my life, I was 9 years old, it was my asthma inhaler. Most people don't know that. At 9, and you can ask my mother, she'll tell you very well. Everything I touched, I did to the max, whether it was video games, whether it was food I liked. At 9 years old, I'm doing that, right? And I was lucky growing up. I grew up in a home where I have a mother that got sober when I was in 3rd grade. And I learned the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And let me explain what I mean by that. See, when you grow up in recovery rooms and when you grow up in church real early, you're given all this knowledge. But I didn't understand that wisdom is applying that knowledge. And that's helped me when I mentor people now, because I now understand part of advocacy is not just giving the knowledge, it's teaching how to apply that knowledge, which then becomes wisdom. I didn't understand that. So, one thing I've learned is being an advocate requires a certain strength, a certain courage. There's a reason there's only a few Harriet Tubmans. There's a reason there's only a few Martin Luther Kings, because you got to be able to have the internal fortitude to be able to deal with what comes with that. And I didn't. So what I did was, real early, if you knew me, you would think that I was okay. Because what I did was I allowed money to be the deodorant for the stench of my soul. What do I mean by that? See, I had such low self-esteem, and I had untreated mental health, and I had untreated substance abuse, that I didn't want to present that stuff. So what I presented to you was I was okay. What I presented to you was nice shoes, dress nice, chasing after the girls. I looked well, because to me, if you liked me, that was good enough. I didn't have the self-esteem to stand on my own. And I've learned advocacy is about standing on your own, and it's about helping people behind you. I didn't understand that back then because I wasn't right in my mind. So by not treating my mental health, by not dealing with my substance abuse, by not doing the things I need to do to get better, I ended up in bad relationships. I ended up in 20 treatment centers that I can remember. I ended up in places that I want nobody else to go through, right? So I end up downtown homeless in Philadelphia. And I will never forget waking up. I had no shoes. I'm out of my mind, gone. And this guy says, Freddie, or he didn't know my name at the time, but he says to me, he says, I called the ambulance. I said, no, let me die. I'm a failure. I failed as a human. I failed as a parent. I'm a horrible human being. He said, you ain't dying today. The ambulance is on its way. Bless him. He saved my life. I entered treatment. Now, mind you, when I entered treatment, I'll never forget getting on the phone because I'm an only child. Call my mom. I always call my mom. I'll never forget. Call my mom. Said, Mom, I'm in treatment. I'll never forget this conversation. She says to me, Freddie, I hope I didn't get sober to bury you because I will. Now, I'm not going to say that everybody should do that, but at the time, that's what I needed. And I don't know what it was about that, but it changed me. Something happened. So I spent 78 days in there, and I began to grow, and things just changed. I started a prayer group. Before I left, I was a leader. And see, then I was learning how to be an advocate, but I didn't even realize it then. Fast forward a year, I entered college. Now, this is where things really, really begin to change. When I enter college, I take my placement test, and all you educators know that when you enter college, you got to take these placement tests. If you didn't do the SATs or ACTs, whatever. So I take my placement test, and I'll never forget, I tested at the remedial level. I got started all lower classes. So I come home, I'm all crying, I'm upset. I'm telling my wifey I'm stupid, I'm not good enough. And she's like, listen, just go to class. And bless her for that. And one thing I've learned is healthy people are not attracted to unhealthy people. By me being healthy, it attracted a good woman that was able to uplift me and point me into the directions where I need to go. So I stayed in school. And I'll never forget, I entered English 025. And the lady says, we're going to write a paper on identity. But this paper is not going to be graded based on grammar. It's going to be graded based on content. I said, okay. So I said, are you sure now? Because I'm going to tell you some stuff. She says, yes, Freddie, I'm sure. So I wrote in there how I was dumpster diving. I wrote in there how I was panhandling. I wrote in there how I was picking underwear out of a treatment center. I wrote in there all the stuff that went through and I went through and all the pain. She tells me after class, she says, Freddie, there's life in this paper. We're going to get you published. Now, mind you, I don't know nothing about no publications. I don't know nothing about scholarly journals. I don't know nothing about none of that stuff. I said, okay. Fast forward, I get a scholarship to this conference, Marginalized to Empower. Changed my life. I go to this conference, and at this time I had business cards saying I'm a motivational speaker. I don't know nothing. I'm handing them out. Hey, my name's Freddie. I'm a motivational speaker, blah, blah. I don't even realize at the time I'm learning to be an advocate. I don't even realize at the time. So I'm in a workshop, and they're talking about collegiate recovery programs. I had never heard of it. So I'm raising my hand every 5 minutes in the workshop, right? I'm so happy to be here. They got food everywhere. I'm at St. Joe's. I'm calling my mom, saying, I'm at St. Joe's. I'm eating food. This is so fun. I can't believe it, right? I don't know nothing about anything. The keynote address is talking. I'm writing all these notes down. I'm writing. SAMHSA. Oh, I don't know nothing. I'm just learning, right? So at the end of the workshop, the lady comes up to me and says, hey, I know somebody that is looking for a paper for the op-ed section to talk about collegiate recovery programs. Would you like to get involved? I said, yeah, I got this paper on identity. She said, send it to me. I sent her the paper. Don't you know that ended up being on the front page of the current section of the op-ed section of Philadelphia Inquirer? See, what I was learning then is that I wasn't at college to pick a major. I wasn't at college just to be here to change my bank account. I was at college to literally change my soul. And I was supposed to use my story to advocate for others that don't have it as good as me. I was supposed to use my story to help other people coming behind me. I was learning, but I didn't understand. So I ended up, and I met a lady there that worked for this foundation called Ammon Foundation. I ended up getting involved with them. I got a scholarship with them. Don't you know, my advisor, when that comes out in the paper, that Monday morning, my advisor calls me up to her office. She got a phone call from the president at the school that said that they would like to know what they can do to have a collegiate recovery program and offer more programs for people in recovery. All this based off of me telling my story. All this based off of me willing to tell it and me willing to let people know what's going on with me and where I'm at. Don't you know, I then get connected with the marketing department of my college, where they then put me on the front cover of the yearly magazine that they send out. I'm now the face of the college based on a story that I wrote about myself based on where I was at, I've now become the face of the college. Literally, couldn't believe it. I'm an advocate. Now I taught you how I became an advocate, but let me give you the tutorial of moving in these rooms as an advocate. Once I became an advocate, I thought, oh, great. You know, my name's Freddie. I'm the leader on campus. I talk about collegiate recovery and why we need to do this. I didn't know that these systems are built on networks. See, what we need to understand is the system was not designed for the people at the bottom to have a say. The system was not designed for the marginalized people to have equality. And it surely was not designed to have equity, right? So I had to learn when I go into these rooms, I'm going into these meetings and I'm asking for funding. I'm saying, yeah, can we have funding for a pizza party? I didn't realize that I have to talk their language. I didn't realize that I have to say and understand things in order for them to listen to me. So when I got in those rooms, I had to learn, oh, wait, I can't just ask for money. I got to say things like, can you allocate funding to our program? I had to learn that if I bring up words like retention, that'll get the ear of these people. Because I didn't know that before. The reason I didn't know that is because that's not taught. That's things you got to learn. Do you know that I got asked to be a national keynote at a national retention conference? I swear to you, I had no idea what retention meant. I had to call my advisor and ask her. I said, what is retention? They asked me to speak at a conference about retention. I never knew what it was. But this is based off me becoming an advocate. I was starting to learn how to move in these rooms. And let me be clear about this. When I'm being brought into these rooms, what I learned is there is a difference between equality and equity. Let me explain. See, I had to finally realize is you could be in a room, but sometimes you're in there to be seen and not heard. You know, I've always heard, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Well, I've actually been at the table, but I had no say on what that menu looked like. I've been in those positions. So I had to learn when I'm in these rooms, people that don't look like me, people that are not from my background have to say things like, what about what Freddie thought? What about what Freddie said? Well, you know, Freddie had a good idea. Then that can get their attention and to realize it is important for us to make sure that we fund these programs. I didn't know these things. So now when I teach my mentees, I teach them, listen, get well read, understand what you want to do in life and understand what they're looking for in those institutions. How can you better help your institution, right? So like with these collegiate recovery programs, I quickly learned that I have to explain to them why it's important for them to give funding for a pizza party. Because one thing is, and I've learned this in life, unfortunately in society, we live on a thought process and a climate of thinking of until the unaffected are affected. And one of the things I finally realized is that we can no longer be like that. We have to be more of a point where everybody has a voice and a say at the table. So I'm at these tables and I'm in these meetings and I'm frustrated because things aren't going the way I want them to go. And I'm very sad and it's hurt me. And I'm talking to my network and they're explaining to me, Freddie, if you want to get their voice, you got to learn how they move. You got to learn how they talk. You got to learn the things that they're looking for. So I started sitting in on meetings and just listening. I started going to other meetings and just kind of paying attention. I started going to other meetings where I'm seeing how they move into different things. And then I started to realize that these systems are not in place for us to maneuver. I'll never forget being at a conference, right? Where I'm at a conference and the lady tells me, what are you doing keynote and you don't even have your PhD yet? And you know what that did for me? That built my fire up to make sure I fight for others behind me. That built my fire up to make sure, okay, these systems aren't set up for collegiate recoveries to have a voice at the table, but I got to do everything I can so that the people behind me can have it better. And let me tell you why I'm doing it. I just told you I want it to be better for people behind me, but it's deeper than that. See, when I'm in these rooms and I'm asking for funding for a pizza party or funding for, us to go bowling, when I'm in these rooms asking for that, I have to realize that the people in front of me don't understand why that's important. They don't understand that that pizza party might be the difference of somebody shooting heroin in their neck. They don't understand that a person coming to that pizza party might not snort meth for that hour, and that might save their life. They don't understand that that pizza party might be the only good part of their day. I got to break down to them why it's important for them to care about the people that they don't understand. I got to make sure that when I'm in those rooms, I am a voice. Because being an advocate, I got to be honest with you, it's not fun. It's not easy. It's hard because I'm up against systems that don't want me here. I'm up against systems that weren't built this way. So I have to try to make a path for the other people. One thing being an advocate has taught me is I have to love the labor more than the fruit, because the labor isn't going anywhere. It is for, my fruit's gonna come. But what I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to build it up so that I can make sure people coming behind me have fruit as well. That's how we expand things. That's how we make things better, where we're sharing the wealth, where we're sharing the resources, where we're allowing everybody at the table to have a voice. Until we do that, we're going to be a microcosm of what we're seeing going on in the world right now. We're going to be a microcosm of things not getting done. I can't tell you how grateful I am to know that we even have collegiate recovery, that we even have a place where these students can come on campus and say, hey, man, I had a bad night last night. I relapsed. I don't feel right. I just want to quit. But yet we got a room of people that can uplift that person and tell them, don't quit. It's important you stay because you matter. We need you. So I ask everybody that's on here, right? I know being an educator and being a leader is hard. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of patience. I would ask you, when you lay your head down at night, what is going on about collegiate recovery that you don't like? And then I will ask you, what can you do to make it better? What resources do you have? What ways can you make sure that collegiate recovery, the problems we're dealing with right now, they won't be the problems 10 years from now? What can you do in order to make sure that 10 to 20 to 30 years from now, collegiate recovery will be in a much better position? Because until we tap in and deep down deep, until we start asking these tough, hard questions, it's not going to change. I'm so grateful that this university was able to put this together, because now we can put all the minds that are in this and ask ourselves, what ways can we do it? I've been connecting since I've been on here because I'm trying to tap in. Okay, you've been doing this. All right, you've been doing this. All right, well, maybe I can tap in with this person to do that. That's how. Because without networking, without systems that get challenged, the status quo stays the same. And look around. Things ain't getting no better. Things been worse. And I don't want that. I don't want my grandkids to still be going to school fighting for funding. I want it to get to a point where, just like we pay for 100 pretzels for orientation, we send that same amount of money for collegiate recovery to make sure they can go bowling, to make sure they got a pizza party, to make sure they can do the things they need to do. And also making sure that when we are talking about programming, that it is instilled in the program, that the counseling center is connected, that the Office of Disability is connected, that all of us are intertwined so we know what's going on. So when student A is bothered by one thing, he got so many different resources that he can tap into. By the time he leaves campus that day, he feels supported. That's one of the reasons I was able to graduate and do the things I'm doing, is because I had so much support. I felt like I couldn't lose. I felt so supported. I felt so connected that it allowed me to be at a part where I just knew in my heart and I just knew in my mind that I was going to make it. I'll say this and I'll end. I will never forget my first speech. I was at Clarion University. I had did a workshop for the Pennsylvania Black Conference on Higher Education. And I was the only student first of all, I was the only student to do a workshop. Secondly, I was the only person to do a workshop on mental health and substance abuse. And I will never forget, I did that and I get a call from Clarion University. And they asked me to be a keynote speaker for their Black student meeting. And my best friend and my mom was there, and I'm nervous writing my first speech. I'm just, And I'll never forget it to end. I was telling my mom, I'm sorry, I messed up, da-da-da. She said, no, Freddie. She said, Freddie, by the man you have become, by the things that you're doing, and by speaking out, I can finally go to my grave and sleep well. See, what I finally realized is being an advocate changed the course of my life. I don't have a choice anymore about if I want to advocate. You know why? Because other people made it a point to make sure I was good. They shared their resources. They shared their wealth. They shared their things that they had. If they don't do that, I'm not here. The whole reason I'm even here is because I got connected with Ammon, which got me connected with Rachel, which then Rachel shared her resource that got me connected with this university. Otherwise, you don't even know me. All based on the fact that I was willing to share my story. My first ever assembly I did in New Jersey. I'm so nervous, right? I'm crazy nervous. And I get done and I asked the third grader, because I needed to have some confirmation I did okay, right? I asked the third grader, I said to the little girl, I said, how do you think I did? She said, Mr. Freddie, you did wonderful. She said, before you came in here, I was making bad decisions. And now that you're here and you told me I'm going to make better decisions. That type of stuff will stick with me forever. You know, since COVID, it's been funny because a lot of people keep asking me what I've been doing. I've been grinding. You know why? And I've been working on more advocacy. And you know why? I'll tell you why. Because the places I speak at, some of them kids, the only meal they're getting is when they go to school. Some of them kids, the one school I spoke at, they got a laundry system because they know that a lot of these kids ain't coming from homes where they have laundry, right? Like, that's what's going on. So it is important for me to remember why I'm advocating, because I don't have a day to take off. I tell my wife all the time, I ain't taking a day off since I ate out of that dumpster. I don't have an hour to waste. I don't have time to waste, because no matter what car I can get, no matter what house I can get, no matter what money I can get, I'm never getting time back. And it is important for me to make sure every time that I don't want to advocate, I need to realize that somebody might not eat that day. I need to realize when I don't want to advocate, I'm literally helping somebody not move forward. It is no longer a job. It's my duty to make sure I advocate, because somebody helped me get where I'm at. So you know what I'm doing? Making sure others get where they need to go. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to leave you with this. What is your legacy in collegiate recovery? What will you do to make sure that these networks and these systems that are in place that don't want to give us a voice, they will give us a voice? What will you do to ensure that your resources and the things that you have can make things get better? How will you help? Because I tell you what, you all have gifts, you're all unique, you're all talented. We need you. We don't have enough voices at the table. And until we get some, we're going to be right where we're at. Thank y'all for allowing me to share my gifts and my stories. Have a blessed day.
Thank you.
All right, Freddie.
Thank you. And so we have about an hour left of this session. And so this is really a time where we can open it up for conversation. And that's the beautiful thing about this conference. It's really about us learning from presenters, and also the audience and attendees giving us a chance to learn from them. You know, we all come from different backgrounds, different experiences, different ways that we all advocate. And so, you know, if you have questions or comments or anything that you would like to add to the conversation, feel free to plop it in the chat box or unmute yourself. Yeah, thanks again, Freddie, for that empowering and motivational topic.
Bless you. Thank you.
And I'd like to invite Fiona as our co-facilitator as well. So she'll be helping me navigate just the conversations that we're getting ready to have, and if there's any questions that pop up.
Thanks so much, Freddie, for everything.
Oh, thank you.
That was really amazing. And I'll give a couple people a chance to go first, but I have some questions too. So if anyone has any questions, pop them in the chat. And if not, I'll go forward with mine.
Yeah, and I love, there was, if you've been active on the WOVA app, there's been a community kind of board, and somewhere I read it was like, you know, there's no like dumb question, you know, everyone will be thankful that you did ask a question because they might have been wondering the same. So thank you, Terry, for your question. He asked, what are some specific and actionable ways that educators can help?
Great question. Thank you for that question. Share resources. Teach what you know and how you got there. What does that mean? That means my advisor took me into a meeting and told me to sit down and listen and watch. When we left the meeting, she told me to make sure I had a list of questions to ask her. Share. Don't hoard what you have. Share the wealth. That's the greatest thing about knowledge, is the ability to share it.
Yeah, and if anyone else wants to add to that point, feel free to make additional comments. Like myself, I would like to build on that as someone who works in the education system and was strongly involved with collegiate recovery. I think incorporating resources on syllabi, incorporating resources on PowerPoint slides on your first day of class, if you are, you know, a professor and you're giving lectures, that could mean, you know, that one opportunity for someone to realize that there are on-campus services or within the community. So I think that's always important for faculty to know. And then even staff, if they're in the education environment, having different types of flyers in their office, like for instance, at UC Riverside, we try to disseminate flyers as best as we can, and staff within like the counseling department, staff that just work in different department areas, they'll include flyers of our recovery meetings.
Can I give another example?
Yes, please do.
Like my advisor sends me a list. She's become a family member of mine, right? Like we talk about more than school. She got my whole house in therapy. True story. One of the things you can do is share ways of connecting with other people. Like my advisor will send me scholarship opportunities, right? She will challenge me. She will give me books to read. Basically, treat every student that you're seeing as if it's your own. Care about them like you would care about your own. When you do that and when you have empathy, you will be more intentional.
I love that.
I'm an open book. Ask me anything. She recommend getting pizza money. Rachel's awesome. Okay, so let me tell you how this went. And this is another story about how being an advocate is going to get tough and it's not going to always feel well. So I'm in a meeting about funding, and like the third one, I like couldn't get nowhere. Like I was saying stuff, but they wasn't paying me no attention. And then finally, somebody said to me, have you ever brought up retention? And I didn't know what that was. So I said, hey, first of all, I had a petition. Second of all, I said, if we are able to if you are able to allocate funding to this department, it can help raise retention. Trust me on this. When you bring up that word retention, everybody in the room will stop eating and they'll start paying attention. You know why? Because retention affects funding. Retention affects how many people are going to be at the college. And there's not a college in the world that doesn't want to have a retention rate that is, not good, right? So my point to you is that it's words like that. But I didn't know those type of words. So you have to get well read, you have to get well versed, and you have to be around people that know this higher ed verbiage and this language in order to speak it so that you can get the things you need. Because the people at the top, if I say to them, yo, I need money for this so my man don't get high, they're gonna look at me crazy. But if I say, can you allocate these resources so that retention can be better, they'll listen.
Do you mind adding to that, like what retention is? Because like similarly, I had no idea what that word even meant. Like even sometimes these days I'm like, retention. Okay, how is that defined? Like, what is that?
Okay, retention is about how many people come back to your college and how many people don't. That's the bottom line of it, okay? And no college doesn't want returning people, okay? When colleges' retentions get low, that means the budget and the profit margin gets low. And when the bottom line gets low, they get to paying attention. So that's what retention is.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a good, I wanted to break it down in layman's terms because I didn't want to go off crazy.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. So just ensuring that students are staying enrolled in the college, right. And, if there has a moment where maybe they leave, then that they come back. I agree, though. I like that Rachel brought that question, because it led to the conversation that I was interested in having as well. Just in terms of learning the language in these different environments. And right. I'm not sure if you have any advice more than what you provided. I think you mentioned, just sitting in the rooms and listening. But beyond that, can you give some guidance for those that are?
Yeah. So it's a couple of things, right? It's a two-part thing. It's a great question. So I used to think that when I got a leadership position, that meant that people were listening to me. No, it doesn't. Because I thought like, okay, I'm the leader of the CRP. Yay! Now, if I write a memo, if I write an email, they'll answer me back. It's not how this works. I had to learn the difference between equality and equity. So I had to learn that when I'm in those rooms, that I'm gonna have to speak up. And I had to learn that, when you do speak up, I'll put it like this. I've learned that every time I ask somebody for something, that opens me up to a hard no. I learned that. I never knew that before. I had to learn that if I'm going to be in that leadership position, whenever I ask for something, that might mean no. It also might mean they might say, not right now, or bring me some more material. So I hope that kind of answered the question.
Yeah. I always feel like I have something I want to add.
Yeah,
Like
that's
you
fine.
said, I like to talk apparently, but like you said, like if you might get a no, but like a phrase that I live by is that if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So by just even initially asking, that's at least plopping the like planting seeds. That's something that I like to say too. Maybe right now, like you said, maybe right now isn't the time that they can allocate funds to the CRP or the student organization that you're trying to initiate, but at least they have it in the back of their minds that this is an organization that is asking for money. So maybe if there is other future opportunities, they know that you have a history of asking for money and this is something you're going to be persistent on. And so,
Yeah.
mhm.
I actually have a question myself. You talked about how you were, for example, like asked to speak for a retention conference and you didn't know what retention was. I'm wondering, that made me think about imposter syndrome and if you ever struggled with that and what did you overcome that?
That is so great. Okay, true story. So I was at the Marginalized to Empower conference the second time. The first time I went is when I got published. And then the next year when my face was on the magazine, they asked me to actually come back and speak on the panel. So I went to a conference that I didn't know nothing about. And the next year I spoke there. True story. So when I got there, I'll never forget, I'm in the room. And of all the speakers, I had the lowest degree. Everybody in there was published, books, they were just artists. And I felt like I wasn't good enough. And a lot of things, and I had to learn this. A lot of places I have spoken, matter of fact, all the places I've ever keynoted at, I've had the lowest degree in a room, all of them. I have never been in a conference where the keynote, opening, closing doesn't have a degree or isn't been published or isn't been journal. I have never been at one of them. So I've always been in a situation where as far as the status quo in the room, I'm not it. But I'll tell you what that did. I remember calling my mom and I remember talking to her about it and saying, man, I'm not good enough and I can't do this and everybody's in here. But she told me, she said, Freddie, don't raise your voice, raise your argument. She said to me, Freddie, stop complaining and start figuring out how they got where they got and start grinding and start getting your mind right. So what I realized is I'm going for jobs that they normally don't give to me. I'm going for situations that they don't give. So I'm going to have to come to the table better. I'm going to have to come to the table with a resume that's more accolade. I'm going to have to come to the table where, I'm a little bit more well-read, because the reality of it is, as far as the system is, I'm not supposed to be here. So you know what? After a couple times of not feeling good, after I went to a couple more, I started feeling a little empowered. And I started realizing, I said, wait a minute. It's not that I'm not a good speaker. It's not that I'm not good enough. I just don't have that degree yet. I just don't have my doctorate yet. But truth be told, and I should say this and mean this, I'm the best speaker in this room. And if I don't believe that, what am I doing this for? So that's what happened. When they told me that I couldn't be a national keynote because I don't have my doctorate degree, that just pushed me further to go get it. And by God's grace, I'm working on my third one as we speak.
Yeah.
Congratulations, that's so amazing. 3 doctorates, oh my God. Did I hear that?
No, three keynotes. No.
Like, dang, holy. I'm like, wait, how long have you been sober for?
No.
What's going on with me? Why am I not? And it's funny because we immediately go into that comparison mode. And at the end of the day, everyone who has a PhD had to get a master's, and everyone who had to get a master's had to get a bachelor's. Everyone who has a bachelor's had to get a high school diploma. And we've all been in these spaces, and to compare ourselves to, it's literally just a social construct, and it's good to, if it adds value to how you feel about yourself. But when you start to use some AA lingo, making grades or academia your higher power, that's not feeding you anymore. That's not serving you anymore. And so it's interesting. And I definitely myself struggle with imposter syndrome a lot, less now. Like you said, I mean, self-esteem is built by esteemable acts, and that's how it goes. And so I feel a little better now. But in the beginning, I was like, oh man, what am I doing here? And I don't know if I should be here. Everyone else seems really like accomplished and smart, and I don't know if I'm there yet. And so I think we all have to give ourselves grace, and it's such a common thing for people in recovery.
Yeah, and
I was just gonna say real quick, there's one thing that they can't argue with, the talent, the skill set, and they can't argue with the dumpster. They can't get that in a book. They can't get that in a lab. To come from that and to be here, they gotta respect it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I wanted to build off some of the comments in the chat, like Christine mentioned like a PhD in lived experience, and Keith mentioned, some of the great people that he knows didn't have a college degree, who made significant changes. So kind of on that end, we, a lot of times we say like, we would like to hear from people who have experience with the things that they're advocating for. So maybe if someone was in the room and they, had a strong passion for advocating for, people in recovery, maybe specifically on a college campus, but they, maybe they're a staff member and maybe they don't have a PhD, they don't have a master's degree. What kind of fuel would you give them to, ignite that fire, just to let them know that like you don't need a degree to be an advocate, and like maybe what kind of skills would you suggest them to tap into?
That's a great question. What I would tell them is, you're here, you deserve to be. My best friend, he probably don't even know this, but I remember sending him a picture when I was in Boston at the HRE conference, and I was at Harvard. I told my wife, I said, we got to go over to Harvard. I got to take a picture on campus. I got to do it, right? And I took a picture, I sent it to him. He was like, you're there because you deserve to be. He probably don't even realize it. That hit me that I didn't get here based on a degree. I got here because my life and my skill set was good enough. I'm good enough to be in the room. The only thing separating me from you is time in academia. That's it. So I would tell anybody that thinks they're not good enough, think about this. You have survived all you survived in whatever walk of life, because we've all been through things in life. I don't care where you come from. You didn't survive that by accident. You survived that because there's a reason for you to be here. So you need to figure out, why did I survive that? And what can I do to use that gift and that talent to help somebody else? Don't ever let anybody tell you if you're good enough. So many times we look at what can go wrong instead of what can go right. And I finally realized, get in the room and then figure out how you change the room.
Yes, I love that.
I have a quick question, actually. First of all, Freddie, that was incredible. Amazing. Thank you. Impassioned. And just going back to this talk of people with PhDs and feeling like the least educated person, I would come to hear you talk any day over going to a normal academic conference. So thank you for that, and what you're sharing. And also, like you shared, as an academic myself, I like what was said about just time in academia. And I mean, I learn so much, often more from my students than I do from my fellow colleagues. And my students don't even have their BAs, their sort of college degrees yet, but there's so much to learn from others, and talking about that difference between wisdom and knowledge that you talked about, and figuring out how I can apply it. A specific question I had for you was about the retention question, because it's something I'd heard in passing before, but you really cemented it for me as why it's so important. Have you found that some schools are more receptive to that retention question than others? And how have you navigated, for example, sort of working with schools that have high retention versus that have low retention? What strategies do you think work? Do some strategies work best with some versus others, or has it worked well overall?
Bless you. I'm humbled by your comments. Truly, I am. Thank you. So here's what I've learned. When I get to talking to schools about bringing me in to speak, the first question is how does it help fill what their needs are? And what I had to learn is a lot of these schools got needs that have to be filled. And when those needs get filled, the paperwork gets checked, right? I didn't realize that. I thought they were doing that because they wanted to help souls and save people. No. So what I've learned to do is that when I talk to them, and even on my website, I say, this is how I can help you figure out needs and figure out how you need to get what you're getting. Most of the time, the two conversations I had, most of the time, a lot of things I get is, our funding is low, And if the funding's low, we have to make ways about how I could go about helping them in ways that'll make it better for their students. As far as the low and the high retention, the bottom line is, if they care enough, they'll figure it out. Like, and that's just true. Like, I can't sit here and say I've seen one or the other. What I've seen is, if the school cares enough about their students, they're going to make a way to bring a speaker in that is speaking on an epidemic that is killing people worse than we've ever seen in the history of this country. Like, as far as I'm concerned, when I talk to these schools and what I've been told, I shouldn't have to convince you. If you're paying attention, if you're living in the same world I am, then you understand what's going on out here in the world. Then you understand that, like, we are hit by an epidemic right now that is affecting every culture, race, and society known to man. So the fact that I got to even explain to you why I'm important for your student body, you should know that health is wealth. You should know that the best way to educate your students is making sure they're healthy before they even walk into the classroom. We shouldn't even be talking about retention. We should be talking about, wait a minute, you can make the students healthy? Because once they get healthy, that's when they turn into the Kate Spades, the Anthony Bourdains, the Robin Williams. Notice all them people I just named all have mental health issues, but unfortunately, they're all resting in power. But you know what? They've all changed the fabric of their institutions. So it's not about whether or not we have the brains. It's not about whether or not we're smart enough. Ask George Bush. His life don't suck, right? And he's one of us. So to really answer your question, I haven't seen different, because I've seen that when they care enough, they figure out a way to bring a speaker in there to deal with these issues. That's what I've seen.
Freddie, how you
Yes.
doing, Freddie? Thank you so much. You're such an inspiration, Freddie. I think we're talking about this discussion around retention, and we're talking also about making students' mental health a priority on campus and stuff. And I can't do nothing but think about Proposition 16, which is on the ballot here in California. And it will repeal the 1996 California Proposition 209, which amended the California Constitution and prohibited government institutions from considering race, sex, or ethnicity, specifically in the areas of public employment, public contracting, and public education. The UCs are a school of public education. The CSUs are schools of public education. So if we are going to make mental health and where retention a priority, follow the money, what is the California Recovery Program doing to support that prop? Because that would give the institutions, the universities, the CSUs, the UCs, the opportunity to bring more faculty members, more staff members in, more mental health providers in that are of color, and particularly African American. So I'm asking the California Recovery Program, are they in support of Prop 16, which would indirectly but directly address some of the issues that so many students of color are facing on campus regarding mental health, not being able to see students, not being able to see faculty, mental health providers that have shared some of the same similarities as and life experiences, which research has shown has been key to their academic success and succeeding mentally. So California Recovery Program, Proposition 16, where do you stand?
I ain't got to answer that one, but I do have, I want to get into some after you go ahead, or whoever wants to answer.
If the California Recovery Program is talking about policies, right, that sounds like that's something that should be in discussion regarding where they are on trying to address some of the issues that are taking place on campus. Because the root of the problem of retention, the root of the problem of substance abuse use is mental health. Students not feeling like they're in a safe, brave place on campus. And if we were to be able to get that particular prop passed, that would give the institutions the opportunity to hire more faculty, more staff, more advisors, more mental health people of color.
If anyone would like to chime in and add a comment regarding that, feel free. Freddie, I know you're not located in California, correct? So yeah, you're
Thank God. I got enough problems in Philly, trust me.
Yeah, but if anyone has, a perspective on it, feel free to chime in. This is definitely a safe space where we all are going to be, all opinions and perspectives are welcome.
I thought that it was really weirdly worded, because when you read what's on the ballot, it says something along the lines of like, allows employers and educational institutions to discriminate based on, you know, this or that or this or that. And I think I'm definitely not that educated on all of the propositions. And I think that there's a lot of nuance that goes into swaying, obviously, people. And, you know, when you read that, you're like, yeah, no discrimination. That's horrible. But then once I looked into it, it was like, no, like that would literally take down affirmative action in California, I believe. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because this is just what I could piece together on the internet. And I just think that it just shows so clearly how the way that these little snippets on the ballot are written are so they misconstrue the issue completely. And it's hard to know who to believe with any of this stuff. So I think I voted no, because I was like, I don't want affirmative action to go away.
And thank you for that. I want to, let me add something to this. What I've learned is, and I had to come out of, you know, I come from a home where, you know, my mom just did her job outside to hit the gate, do the 8, right? Like she took her work home with her, right? So I thought that everybody worked like that, and I found out that's not the life. Okay, I will say this. A lot of these issues, I believe that policy is great, but I also believe there has to be oversight of that policy. I can't tell you how many times there's a policy in place, but because there's no oversight, they're getting away with criminal stuff. Example, a lot of this stuff too starts in HR. What type of people are we bringing in the building? Just because I got a policy doesn't mean I'm hiring people in HR that are going to follow that procedure rightly. We got to make sure that we're bringing the right type of educators in the building that understand that policy and understand that if it's not followed, there will be a consequence to that. Just because it's there don't mean it's followed. So I would say to that, yes, policy is important, obviously, but I would also say, who are we bringing in to ensure that that policy is followed, and who is the oversight of that committee to make sure that things are in line? Because if without a system of checks and balances, you see the world.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, you know, we've been talking a lot about equity and equality, and in terms of, you know, being an advocate for hiring more Black and people of color on, you know, college campuses, whether that is, you know, service providers in terms of counseling services, whether that's faculty and staff. I think that's been a question that I've been trying to address. You know, I've been on hiring committees for like our wellness new vice chancellor, and I was really trying to figure out how to advocate for, you know, a person of color. And just because maybe their experiences were a little bit different, like how was I going to show that that person was more qualified, you know, for different reasons rather than just, you know, same degree as some other person, or, you know, just trying to understand that systemically there are different barriers for people of color, that maybe this other applicant doesn't have the same experiences. And so I don't know if that's like something anyone has thought about, but if you were like, you know, advocating for more people of color or Black individuals on the college campus, or just even in whatever table you're sitting at, you know, what would be maybe some ways that you would pose to try to provide more equitable access to, you know, having more people at the table?
Well, I know for me, I'll just say for me, one of the things I do is when I get a new mentee, anybody that's in higher ed administrative, I take them right up there and meet them. Hey, meet my new mentee. First thing I do, because I want them to be able to tap into the same things I can tap into. That's the first thing I do. Come meet all the people I know at the higher up. Not follow me. No, I take the ego right out of that. Come meet the people I know so I can lift you up with me.
Yeah, so building stronger connections. So, I mean, I guess to my point, I feel like we have a lot of conversations the past day or two about just trying to get more people through the doors in terms of seeking recovery. You know, that there are statistics showing that there's less individuals of color that are seeking support. And I do feel like that if there is a person of color that is leading kind of initiatives, that they're more likely to walk through that door. And so ways that I've been trying to advocate for, different service providers or people of color or Black individuals to be a part of our community is just, I feel like they can connect differently. Like, a white individual isn't going to connect with a Black student as well as a Black leader with a Black student. And so I feel like that's been my strongest argument I've been able to come up with so far, is that, if we're talking about climate and, trying to have an environment that is welcoming and safe and, open to a vast number of different types of people, we have to have different types of people as our leaders and as the people that are, pushing for change. And so I think that's the best thing I've come up with, but definitely that's why I posed it, because I wanted to hear what other people thought, in terms of trying to get equitable access for different people. How do we go about that? So, I mean, maybe that's just a comment that people can start lingering on. And as you go about your advocacy efforts, trying to keep that in mind of like, hey, what argument am I going to make? So that way we have more diverse people at the table and, fighting for different things that are needed.
I think, I was listening to one of Freddie's speeches, his public speaking engagements about a week ago, and he used the word being intentional. Maybe not necessarily in this particular framework, but we need to be more intentional. At UCLA, I had the opportunity to apply for a position on campus as one of the student leaders there. And I reached out to a student there who was white, a lot of respect for him. He's one of my best friends. And he was a year before me in the master's program. And I asked him, did you apply for the same position? His words were to me, Tyrone, the last thing that program or the Luskin School of Public Affairs is need another white person in another leadership position. That is so true. I think I'm so appreciative of his honesty. Mm-hmm. He created space intentionally for a person of color. And I did apply, and and I, for other reasons, I did not accept the position once it was offered to me. But he was being intentional. He looked and evaluated where he was, the privilege that he already had, the experiences that he already had. Did he really need that title, or could he make room for another individual? And he did walk me through that application process. And, as I said, the position was offered to me, but after I reviewed the position, I knew that I needed to make space for another student, preferably of color, because I had already did that type of leadership roles. So sometimes me taking a step back, and in this case, a white person taking a step back, because like he said, the last thing we need is another white person running something at Luskin School of Public Affairs. So being intentional. The other thing that I see real quick is that I actually am doing a field placement at a nonprofit, a $30 million nonprofit. 9 months ago, the board was all white, all 12 people, providing homeless services to people in the San Gabriel Valley. The executive board was all white and still is all white. Since the uprise, since the movement, they have added on, and they removed a couple of people who probably were time for them to go a long time ago, and added on 2 other individuals that were white. So we have to look at being intentional in the work. And I don't know if I have that power, that privilege to be intentional as much as the dominant Kochner does have. But, it has to be done intentionally. Are our nonprofits, are our agencies, are our institutions capitalizing off of the trauma of people of color? And when I mean capitalize off of them, are they really placing policies in place? Again, I'm going back to policies that will uplift people out of color, provide mental health services to the students on campuses? Or are they just collecting their 6-figure salaries by putting my picture on their website, oh, Tyrone did a great job. He got sober and he's now at UCLA getting their six figures. They, you know, so yeah, they have to be, it's intentional. Freddie, that's your word. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you. Real quick, I just want to add to that. And he makes a good point. And I said this when I was speaking. I've been in rooms where you to be seen and not heard. And I had to walk that line to get to the next step. But one thing, I'll never forget my mentor telling me this, Dr. Sarah Goldrich Raw, bless her. She told me this. She said, I remember her speaking, and she said, when a student is late, or when a student is, not tardy and not coming to class, do we send him or her the policies, or do we ask them to stay after class and call them and ask how they're doing? The bottom line is we got to care enough. When people care enough, all these issues go away because they sure care enough to collect. They sure care enough to make sure that they network stay in place. They sure care enough to make sure that the people that look like them stay up there. Until they care enough, we're going to be here. And we got to be better than this, period.
You mentioned empathy when you were talking earlier, and I completely agree. I feel like when people become more empathetic and are more caring, their just mindset shifts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We see in the NBA, they put all Black Lives Matter on the court quickly because they knew whatever we got to do to get them on that court, we'll do. So if that means all Black Lives Matter and that means them jerseys got to be all Black Lives Matter, all Black Lives Matter.
Any lingering thoughts or questions anyone would like to bring up?
I have a question. It's a bit of a shift, but I'm wondering, as an advocate, how did you stop yourself from feeling burnt out? Because I know that this work can be really thankless and tiresome, and you feel alone in it a lot. So how do you stop the burnout? How do you turn it from being, because it can quickly become a chore. It can feel like a chore. And I don't, as an advocate myself, I don't want my advocacy to be a chore. I want it to be something that I can fully experience, and because it's not going to be, I'm not going to be in college forever. I'm not going to be able to be a CRP leader forever. And I want to enjoy this part of my life without feeling burnt out all the time. So can you speak to that?
Yes. So that's where your network comes in. The recovery part of it comes in. I have a therapist that's wonderful. They should be paying her double for the help she gives me. I have a rule that at 12 o'clock at night, I have to stop doing homework. I have to stop doing whatever I'm doing. My mentors tell me whenever I lay down at night, stop thinking and just go to sleep. I've had to learn balance, and I'm not good at it. I'd be lying telling you I was. I've had to learn that I can't take on every mentee. I got a mentee right now that is, I love him to death, but he is, woo, okay? I've had to learn I can't save the world. I've had to learn that I can only do what I can do. And I don't want to be busy, but not productive, right? Like I've had to learn that I can only do so much. My therapist always says, Freddie, there's 24 hours in a day. So the bottom line is you have to eat right, you have to sleep. And at the end of the day, if you're not well, then that means your family's not well. And if your family's not well, that's on you because you're the leader of that home. And it is your job to make sure things are all right. So how do I do it? Balance. Do I do it great? No, but I'm getting better. Oh, and by the way, my mom is always on me about being burnt out. I swear she talks to me about that every time we're on the phone. She says, don't get burnt out. I try to listen, I do. I'm better than I used to be.
Thank you. My mom does the same thing. I'm also an only child, so I totally
get it. Yeah, you get it. Yeah. But I know she means well. It's wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely maintaining self-care. All right, so we have another question. The Rooms of Recovery speaks about those that suffer from a spiritual malady. That spiritual malady not only leads to addiction, but also individualism, greed, and disposable populations.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm actually not familiar with.
Not a question, just a statement.
Yeah.
Not a question, but it's just a statement.
Would you like
spiritual malady for me, and this is just my own understanding of higher power, since this is a recovery meeting and I do keep God first in life and in my growth to stay sober, is that, you know, my spiritual malady might not place it, you said it earlier, I believe someone said it earlier, I cannot make my education my higher power. I cannot make my car my education, my car my higher power. I can't make my houses, my traveling, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, my dog, my cat, the research that I do, the title, the letters behind my name, my higher power. If I do, I delve into a spiritual malady. I start engaging in a spiritual relapse before I engage into a physical relapse, which can often be drugs. But that spiritual malady, that spiritual relapse is also individualism, greed, and disposable populations. Perfect example of disposable populations is COVID-19 and how the current administration is moving forward without acknowledging the people of color who are being affected the most, and those that I treat this as if we're disposable populations.
Can I add to that too? So I use, and I say this all the time, right? I'll never forget when I moved out of Philadelphia, because I'm from Western Pennsylvania. I moved out of Philadelphia, and of course I called my mom as soon as I started doing a little bit better, right? Mom, I'm out here, I'm doing well. I told you it wasn't alcohol or drugs. See, I got money, right? I got this, I got that. I'm doing well. Told you it wasn't me. My ex is crazy. I'll never forget she told me, Freddie, you can dress a pig up all you want, but he's still a pig. See, I used to believe that my life got better because I got a better degree, I got a better car, I got a bigger house, I got a better looking girlfriend, you know, I got new Jordans. I used to thought my life got better because the cloth was better, because I got massages. My life got better because I became a better person. And by me becoming a better person, it made me want to advocate for those behind me. So I just think that's real important that people understand that, just in general, that it's not the material and it's not the accolades. A degree's not getting me in heaven, but if I don't act right, I surely ain't getting it.
All right, thank you, Ree, for your question. We have one here that says, why is that administration oftentimes just doesn't care? Why must we press about the financial aspects and not the suffering of the students for them to care? She responded and said, I don't expect anyone to have an answer because there really isn't a concrete answer. There's so many moving parts, but she'd like to hear on, what some people's thoughts are, because if we know why, I think it'd be better to, or like easier to find a solution.
Well, I know I can say this. I use my family for an example. Right? I have an uncle that's had Parkinson's disease for years. I promise you, as far as I ever knew, my family was not well versed about Parkinson's. We are now, right? Like, I bet you if the president of the university had a daughter that was shooting heroin in his neck in his basement, he cared. It's unfortunate, but we live in a society, well, until the unaffected are affected. It has to be that the people in these networks that have control, they have to be affected by this in order for them to care. And when I say be affected, I'm talking about it got to hit their pockets and it got to hit their heart, from what I've seen. And that's not nice, but that's what I've seen.
I agree. It's an unfortunate reality, and, kind of tapping into empathy and compassion again. It's like, we don't want everyone to be impacted by, addiction, by substance use, to care. And so if we can try to foster empathy within administrators to give an ounce of, care, then hopefully that's a way that we can spark, a little bit of passion. I sometimes do always hear, like Freddie, you were saying, sharing your story, trying to evoke a little bit of empathy within them by sharing our story. Maybe they won't care. They're like, oh, whatever. But I think, if that person is a little bit, empathetic, they will listen to people's story and listen about how these suggestions and, guidance and things we're advocating for can make a change in not only our lives, but the people that they serve, the people in the community, and so on.
You ever notice how celebrity or somebody that's real rich will beat a cancer and all of a sudden they donate 10 million or 20 million to research? Why do you got to get it in order to donate? Why can't you just do that from the rip? Why does it take being effective? We got to change that thinking.
Yeah.
I just want to add to that real quick too. Sorry, I'm the one that asked the question. And I feel like one person in administration could care, but would that really make a difference? Because there's students and now alumni and faculty who have been working for years trying to get, a dedicated space on campus. And not only do we not have a dedicated space, we barely have a dedicated department or a dedicated team of faculty members, for our specific CRP. I know people have gone to administration at UCR specifically over and over about this. And it must be very frustrating, because it is, to see no change being done and no one really listening to the concerns that students are bringing up. And I can't help but notice the lack of administration in these spaces that, we're occupying. And even in this online realm, you would think it would be made easier for certain people in administration to come by, but other than, to do the show of it, it's not going to necessarily make a difference, I see. So, change my mind on that. How is it going to make a difference? How are what we are doing here today going to make a difference on this? Because there's been administration in attendance, but is that really going to change their mind about dedicating a space on campus?
Okay, first of all, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for having the courage to talk like that. And thank you for asking your question. Bless you. And I'll definitely got to make sure I connect with you. Being an advocate is not fun. I've said that and I'm gonna say it again. It's tough, but let's look at this a different way. Let me tell you how things can change. So I'm not sure how old you are. I'm old. I was playing Sega Genesis. I'll be 38 in 2 weeks. Lord Jesus. Okay, so let me break down this whole drug policy failed system. In the 1980s, okay, crack cocaine epidemic hit, all right, destroyed people of color family. I know my family got hit by it for sure, right? And they said, well, you know what? You're going to jail. So they locked people up with the smallest amount of crack cocaine, locked them up for years and years and years. When heroin hit the suburbs and affected white populations, all of a sudden, we got to send these kids to treatment. Man, these kids need help. These kids, they got to get help. So, recovery centers of America, and these treatment centers where there's yoga and there's TV and they need help. It's a health thing. Unfortunately, Obama came in and some policies got passed to where some of those things got knocked down, and some of these people that were locked up for hundreds of years were able to get out. My point to you is that I truly believe, and I have to think like this, otherwise I can't do this work, that eventually it will pay off. But I have to understand I'm up against a system that doesn't want it to. So I have to understand I might go to my grave and might only save one. That might happen, but that one is better than zero. So if it means I got to talk about it every day and they don't hear it, then it just means that. But I can't quit. That's one thing I can't do. So I feel you. It's hard. It's tough. But I can never, ever quit, ever, no matter what the situation, because eventually they abolished slavery. Eventually they started making some things better. And look, we got a far way to go. So don't confuse this. But I do believe eventually the tide will turn. I believe that.
Yeah, and I appreciate Tyrone's comment. He mentioned that, sometimes college admin don't understand, how spaces for recovery can, serve as prevention. And, providing a dedicated space could potentially mean that we're admitting that there is a problem on campus. That's something that within our research project that is kind of hosting this conference, we've been talking about as well, that, sometimes college admin, they don't want to admit that their students are using, don't want to admit that this is a problem that they need to address. There's, like Rachel mentioned in the chat again, like stigma. There's still a lot of stigma surrounding addiction. and use disorders and use and abuse, whatever term is more favorable to you. And it's difficult. I think there's less stigma, surrounding mental illness. And I think we're kind of getting towards that point that, it's more comfortable to talk about with those who think it is uncomfortable. So I think that's definitely an impact. But going back to your question, I think that there's so many needs that we have, everyone, not just individuals in addiction or in recovery. I saw that inside perspective when I was working in the Graduate Student Association as the wellness liaison. We're focusing on homelessness, we're focusing on food insecurity, we're focusing on mental illness, transportation. There's so many aspects that impact our lives. And I think it's important to look at it as a whole. We can't just treat one thing, and assume that everything else is going to be fine. I think if I were to try to pose this to an administrator, I probably would say, focusing on recovery will also focus on food insecurity, will also focus on, job security or education. There's so many ways that it will, trickle into the other aspects of their lives rather than just in their recovery journey. I think there's so many ways that, we can try to frame different arguments. But just to your point, Rhee, I think that's kind of maybe how I would try to pose it and say, you should care because we also care about homelessness. We also care about food insecurity and mental health. And this is a part of it.
Right. And look at where we're at. There was no such thing as collegiate recovery. Because I got to look at some progress that's been made. She's right. We ain't nowhere near where we need to be. But we are at least here.
I don't understand, though, also how administration can pretend like there's not a problem when there were, for the past year, many months out of 2019, there were stickers all over campus with UCR's unofficial nickname, UC Reeferside. And then there's UC Raverside. There's University of California Stoner Children for UC Santa Cruz. And obviously at least Santa Cruz does have dedicated spaces and a more dedicated staff for their CRP. But how can you walk past those stickers every day on the campus and not acknowledge that it's a big enough problem to have earned Riverside UCR as a pretty hefty reputation around campus culture abusing?
To answer your question, I love your passion and energy. Oh my goodness, I'm a fan. Just because I see something don't mean I want to accept it. My wife tells me all the time, she can easily not deal with something because when I see it, guess what? That means I got to do something about it. And what's in you ain't in them. And so that's what we got to figure out, how to get what's in you in them. You're right, 1,000%. And that's what we're here. Bless you. Love your energy and passion. Thank you for being who you are.
Can I ask another question, double dip, sort of building on points Tyrone has been making about disposable populations, and also thinking about what you shared about advocacy, sort of thinking of Angela Davis and sort of change coming from advocacy above and beyond anything else. And I'm curious with UCR, especially given that it is a campus with a population that's only 11% white students and primarily students of color, but again, as has been pointed out, very small Black population. And I'm curious about how the work you're doing and sort of maybe the passion element and sharing your own personal story, how you bring that to, are you seeing it? Are you doing it, for example, with predominantly African-American colleges and universities? Just thinking about the lack of access based on my own experience. So my really esoteric, I apologize for that question about what I had said before with retention, really was sort of thinking about a school I was at previously that was super privileged. And it's along these lines. They didn't want to talk about it. There was this very small micro space in the student health center that was for addiction, but it wasn't really advertised. And the work I did with AA in terms of cooperation with the professional community, reaching out to them, they were like, we handle it, we're fine. And maybe, from looking at my own failings, I didn't bring the passion that I'm hearing you bring to that. But as part of that town that I lived in, there was this treatment center that talked about its phenomenal, success rates. And it was all privileged, rich white kids that were getting that sort of treatment. So how do we bring that, to groups, for example, that Tyrone has been bringing up in the chat, and that others here have been talking about today?
So I found I don't get calls from private schools because number one, I found that at least the private schools I deal with, they don't like to give out money. One, two, there's the network that they have is they keep it so tight that you have to literally know somebody to get into them spaces. And I found also that you're right, they don't want to talk about it. So a lot of the calls, like I've spoken to Black student unions, the treatment centers I speak at too, it's funny, it's 90% Caucasian kids, which is deep because the way the world puts it, you would think that the problem's all in bad neighborhoods, but really there's more drugs in the suburbs than I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, it's a good question. I think every state and every situation is different, but I also think that don't confuse. I've had dealings with HBCUs that don't want to talk about it. So it's not like it's, it's not like it's just the one population. I just think every school is different. It just depends on who you're dealing with. That's what I've experienced.
Cool, thanks.
Hi, my name is Joyce Barr. I'm Frederick's mother. And hi, I just wanted to say, I am grateful to see you doing this good work. And as a family, we are proud of you, Freddie. So keep up the good work, my man. Thanks.
Bless you. Bless you. Bless you. Love you, Mom.
Love you too, my man.
I have one last question for you, Freddie, for me.
Yes.
What would you say is like the path for people who are going to graduate soon? Because I'm going to be done at UCR for the foreseeable future in a couple months, and I still want to do stuff. I still want to like contribute. How do you see people?
Great question. Mm-hmm. So your question is, how can you still help? What can you do? Well, number one, I always say this, you know what your passion is now. So that's start one. You know how many people don't know what their passion is in life? A lot of people don't know. A lot of people go to work every day, just collect a check and they're miserable. Okay, so the question now is, I would ask you to say this, okay, with all the people, first of all, get mentees, have people that you're leading because they're gonna keep your integrity right. The other thing I would say to you is, find out how you can develop a network to where you can work on ideas of where you can start your own LLC or your own nonprofit that where you can help. Learn how to write grants so that you can get a grant and start up a program to where students are gonna have places to go. There's money out here. There's resources out here. Learn how to get to them. And once you get those resources, share it. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
I have one more question as well. I'm not sure if,
yes. Please
cut me off if anyone has a burning desire to add something else to the conversation. But in terms of advocacy, I feel like there's sometimes certain kind of qualities that a person must, try to hone in on in terms of, having the courage to speak up, trying to, be charismatic or, whatever qualities you want to add to it. But for those who maybe are a little bit more shy, maybe aren't as, maybe they're new in their recovery and they're trying, to work through that while also being an advocate, it could, I think sometimes we do things before we're necessarily ready, which is a beautiful thing. And so, it's like, maybe just some last minute inspiring words for those who just need that extra push to start, taking that step for themselves and others in terms of advocacy.
Yeah, I would say this. Let me share an experience I had. So remember how I told you all that I had a person tell me, what are you doing keynote and you don't even have your PhD? I can't tell you how many schools I've called and said no because I didn't have a doctorate, or said no because I didn't have a master's. Can't tell you how many conferences said no because I wasn't published in certain journals. Let me tell you why you can't quit, and why speaking up, and why it is so important for you to share your story. I just keynoted my first national conference. I had 982 people in attendance in my workshop. When that workshop was done, all I could do was cry. My mom was on the phone telling me how proud of me she was. If I would have stopped, if I would have gave in, if I would have not thought that my voice mattered, they would have kept winning. That's how people stay in power. That's how these networks don't get challenged. It's because they incite fear and they make us think that our voice and that who we are isn't good enough. No, it is good enough. So I need you to just remember, and I want you all to know this, just know that it is designed for you not to say nothing. By you not standing up, by you not speaking, that keeps them winning. But if you decide that you're going to go against the status quo, if you decide that you're going to share your story, do you know how many people you can empower? Do you know that you can literally start a chain of empowering people to empower other people? Imagine what a world it would be that if every day somebody woke up, their goal was to empower somebody else. You have the power to start a chain like that, literally. Just remember that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope that answered that question.
It did. I feel like the whole conversation you've been having has been so inspirational and motivational. So I, just want to thank you again for being here and, voicing your opinions and voicing your perspective, your experiences, and hopefully igniting a little bit of fire under all of our butts.
Yeah, and real quick, I want to add one thing real fast. A lot of times we celebrate. I always say to this: people see the glory, but they don't know the story. A lot of times in the world we live at, we celebrate trophies. We celebrate graduations. We also need to celebrate when somebody changes their life. We also need to celebrate when somebody beats an addiction and a mental illness. If it was so easy, why can't everybody do it? There's a reason it's hard. To be sober for 24 hours is a miracle. So just remember, you're awesome.
I feel like we all need like little clips of you just to remind ourselves on those days when we're, feeling down in the dumps or feeling like we just, burnt out or, whatever it may be. So I will remind everyone this is being recorded. Feel free to plop it back on. We need a little bit of inspiration.
I'll be putting it out on YouTube too. Please get my views up. Need mine.
Yeah.
Oh, let me put my website in the chat so you can all get at me.
Put your LinkedIn in the chat as well if you can.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. Matter of fact, let me get all that. Hold up, I'm getting it all. Give me one.
Hold on, I just put your LinkedIn in the chat. I was on it on the other tab.
All right, cool. Good luck. Thank you. Yeah, please follow my page.
Thank you, everyone.
Bless you all
today. Yes.
Bless you, Rachel. This is wonderful. Thank you all.
Freddie, love you, homeboy.
Likewise.
All right.
Thanks, Freddie. It said the message LL, but message LLC, right? Yeah. In case others didn't notice.
Yeah, and I highly encourage everyone to collaborate and just stay in communication with those that you've met at the conference. Building connections and building that community is so important. Like Freddie, you were mentioning, just having that network when you're starting to feel burnt out. We need that support from others when we feel like we're the only one fighting the good fight.
Yeah, we're not, man. We're not. Mm-hmm. Time has been over. It's 2020. It's been due. And now we're going to fight.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Freddie, 100%. And with you on that. This has been an amazing, amazing session.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really do.
all of you in the room, this could be you. This could be you, having conversations with others, trying to support their advocacy efforts and, taking what you learned from David, adding in what you learned from others and throughout your lived experiences.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. So what else do we have on this conference today? So we have about a half-hour break, and then there will be an open discussion with students in recovery and allies. Feel free to join. And then later on tonight, we're going to have a open section. So anyone, if you're an ally, in recovery, contemplating recovery, feel free to join us. All of the links are on the WOVA app. You might have also received an email that had all of the links for today's session. So that might be a little bit easier to access.
Actually, too, all of the links are on the UCR Health Communities website. I'm putting those links down in the chat. Or it's just one link, but it has all the other links.
All right, I'm going to stop recording. Thank you so much, Freddie.